This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I am honored to have Ryan Buick. He is the co-founder of Canvas, a Sequoia-based backed startup who talks about all about data and how we can kind of reimagine this world that we live in when it comes to office work with a data-driven world. So we're going to probably get a little bit heavier on data and data tools today and data science than we have in the past. But we're also going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about what it's like to have a startup these days and what's different today versus maybe the way it was, a few years ago. Anyway, with all that being said, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me on.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are in your career and what is it that you do exactly?
Yeah, totally. So, I grew up in San Francisco, actually in the city. And so, really saw technology take off and really change, where I grew up. And I knew I always wanted to be a part of it. So I ran a, internet business in college and then really discovered what product management was after sort of looking at, okay, I don't want to code all day. I like, the business aspect of it, but I feel like I sort of have a foot in both worlds. And so found out what product management was, did a few internships in San Francisco and started, the sort of associate PM track and started a company called AppDirect, and then actually took a role at a company called Flexport. And so I was one of their first product managers. And for those of you in the audience, if you don't know what Flexport is, basically building software for freight. So helping companies ship their goods from their factories, primarily, in Asia, to their warehouses and distribution centers. And so imagine, the product that I was working on was the goal for that product was to feel like Kayak for freight, right? Make it as easy as possible to get your goods and pay for your goods to go from one spot to the other. And so that was a pretty incredible experience. Started out when it was really small, and it grew to 2,500 people in like 3 years by the time I left. So I got to see a rocket ship firsthand. And really where data comes in is when I joined as a product manager. I knew a little bit of SQL, but didn't really have the resources that I typically had of, ask a question and get a dashboard back or get SQL queries back. And so I had a ton of anxiety over, hey, I need to come into this role. This place is growing like crazy. I need to prove myself and I need to be able to show objective, hard evidence behind here's why I want to, here's why we want to prioritize these projects. Here's the numbers that we're currently at. Here's the numbers that we want to be at. And really was struggling to be able to get that data in a way that made sense for me, right? And so really as an operator or as a person who doesn't know a ton of SQL, you have two choices. It's either you get into line with everybody else and you ask your question to the engineers or to the data team, or you export data from all your tools and put them into the spreadsheets and index match and VLOOKUP your way to an answer. And so that's really been the status quo for most operators, and still frankly is the status quo. And so I kind of took it into my own hands and decided to go take a analytics boot camp. So I could learn, advanced SQL, I could learn how to clean data, I could learn, all these different skills, and ended up doing that on nights and weekends, and, was working on internal data products at Flexport, after that. And really just saw that same story take, shape across, 1,000 plus operations employees, business people at Flexport. And so my co-founders and I, we had met there. They're early engineers. We were all on the same team. And we're building a product that was essentially like a spreadsheet interface on top of all these different data sources for a specific internal use case. And we were like watching other BI tool rollouts. And, for those of you who don't know, BI, business intelligence, the process of, dashboarding, the tools that help you, query your database. And so we were watching those rollouts go, not so well. And our tool was being used pretty significantly. And so we decided to go do this ourselves. And so we started, last year and then launched in February of this year. And really what Canvas is a spreadsheet-like interface for all of your data. And so we connect to either the data warehouse, which is a tool that is used to centralize all of your data from your different SaaS tools in your database, make it more analytically performant. But we also integrate with those SaaS tools directly and put folks that don't have the resources on the technical side or on the fiscal side to go and spend months and implement a pretty expensive data stack and to have the actual technical ability to string all of that data together. And so really what we do is help B2B SaaS startups, e-commerce startups, consumer startups be able to take data from all their different sources, be able to explore that with just their spreadsheet skills, be able to collaborate and be able to build dashboards and share that across their org and share that with clients, but not have to rely on technical teams for help. Mm-hmm. And that's really the key difference is letting these business people do what they already know how to do in spreadsheets, but do it over real-time data so you can make faster, better decisions and ultimately, grow your business faster.
Yeah, we're seeing this trend. At least I'm seeing it from the people that I work with in businesses that I'm involved with. Is the buzzword is low code. This low code kind of development where business users are taking more control of data and connecting to it and being able to make decisions and build little mini apps, if you will, or dashboards or things that are useful for them so they can generate reports without having to involve the development team, without spending those expensive resources to build something and then just to go back and tweak it later and have to, get back put in the queue, of going through the intake process and figuring out where this project's going to land, get project management behind it, where you could have a tool that someone could just purchase and then get on there and design something that makes more sense and is fluid and flexible. And is that kind of where you're seeing a lot of your growth happen?
Yeah, that's right. It's primarily, there's a couple sort of aha moments that we see with our customers. The first one is they don't think that they can actually connect, HubSpot, Stripe, their database, Google Ads, right? They don't think that they can actually connect all these tools and get it in one place without, an engineering team or without a data team doing that for them. So that's sort of the first, like, oh, wow, like we can actually do this. The second aha moment is really they've never seen real-time data like they can in Canvas, right? Where you can just grab any table, drag and drop it onto your canvas is what we call it. We're not very creative. And you can drop it onto your canvas and you can see it as if you're in Google Sheets, but it's connected to 1 million plus rows of live data, right? And you can just start to pivot. You can write formulas. You can do the things that you're already doing offline, but you can do it so much faster and really allows you to answer questions that before you weren't even asking, right? You're kind of going from your gut because you're either tired of waiting for help or it was just too much work to do this on a weekly basis in some sheet. And so that's really, the first, sort of hooks that we see. But I think the thing that we're super excited about as well is that you can actually, with most teams being remote now, you can actually tag your data team or you can tag your engineer. We sort of have this like Figma collaborative component where you can, have multiple cursors moving around. You can leave comments directly where the data lives. And, we're not naive. We know that business people are going to get stuck. They're going to have a question like, hey, why don't these numbers match? And what they can actually do in that scenario is tag someone on the data team or on the engineering team and say, hey, can you help me out with this? And instead of having to reverse engineer their formulas and references like they have to do today, they can actually just inspect the spreadsheet work that they've done via SQL, make changes in the code language that they're comfortable with, and those changes will actually appear in the spreadsheet-like interface for the business user. And so really, it's the thing that we're most excited about, which is we can have these two teams with totally different levels of context actually work together to get to the answers faster, rather than this like traditional like file a ticket, like request response workflows that we see everywhere.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool thing. One of the things that I would struggle with for me is now that I have access to all this data in real time and being able to put things together, how do I even know where to start? Like, how do I know what data is important and relevant, and like what correlations I can I make with demographics of my customer here versus, how is that important? How do you find out what data is significant, and how do you guys help people with that?
Definitely. So I think there's all this predictive and predictive analytics and AI to help show outliers in your data and really be prescriptive in that way. And I think the reality is there's only a small percentage of companies that are at that maturity, or they have that level of scale of data where those things are truly helpful. And so what we try to do is work with companies on sort of the other end of the spectrum, which is they have this data, they are running OKRs, right? This objective key result process, basically have every team in the org roll up their different goals and tie them to key metrics as the way to measure those goals. And so what we try to do is say, hey, you're doing this elsewhere offline anyways. The questions that you're asking on a daily basis or on a monthly or quarterly basis, the metrics that you're trying to track, but the majority of your organization is locked out of actually being able to really run those processes themselves. They have to rely on engineering or rely on data teams to help them with the data aspect.
Yeah.
And so really, I think that's sort of the first step is, hey, most businesses know what's of value to them, right? What are the core, aha moments? What are the milestones that they're trying to hit? And we really help them try to automate that process and really bring that process to, real-time data, so that you're not waiting a week or 2 weeks between reporting cycles, right? So you should be looking at these numbers every day. You should understand these numbers. You should be able to ask, if you have a hypothesis, you should be able to drill into those numbers and say, okay, am I onto something here, or is there no correlation, right? And so I think that's really what we try to do first, and hopefully the companies that we work with and the space altogether will get more and more sophisticated, where we can start bringing more intelligence to them rather than having them, be able to define the goals and then, replicate those goals in Canvas.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know for me, like, I think back, I don't know, maybe it's like 15 years ago, I was on a project to build a data warehouse at a company. It was like the first time we had a data warehouse, and we were trying to define like what data goes in there. They're like, just put everything in there. Just put everything in there. And now you hear terms like you have a data lake, you have data warehouses. Where do all those, what do all those terms kind of mean, and how does it, and what should a business really be focusing on when it comes to starting this process of making sure they're pulling in the important data?
Great question. There's this awesome concept of like a data maturity framework, right? And it's basically these different stages. And the first stage for most companies is, you need to just collect and structure the data that you're getting everywhere, right? And so, there's a couple elements of the sort of, I'm doing air quotes, right? The data stack, and the modern data stack, as it's been called. Even postmodern data stack is now like the meme. And the first step is really collecting all of that data. And so you're using, a tool like Segment, right, to collect all of your, events, all your customer data, right? The second step is, you get a warehouse, right? And you're using that to collect the data and centralize that data in a single place. And it makes sense, right? Like you'll see a lot of companies that do send all of their data to the warehouse, and that's a good thing. But there's then multiple stages of this. And so what you'll see is teams using a process called ELT, which is like extract, load, and transform. So they're taking data from their different SaaS tools and sending that into the warehouse. And so that's basically the process of every 12 hours or something, right? You're sending all the data from your different tools into that warehouse. And that's like your pipeline, right? So you've gone from collecting your data to streaming your data into the data warehouse, where you collect it, and then you're transforming that data. And I think this is where, you go from the process of, okay, let's collect everything in the warehouse, but then let's start to structure it and reason about it in a way that actually makes sense for a business, outcome.
Right.
And so there's tools called, DBT, which is basically like a SQL-like tool that lets you, stack SQL queries on top of each other to create, models. And these would be the same models that you're creating in Excel, right? Where you have, customers and transactions grouped together, joined together, right? Or you're changing the grain of the data so it's on a particular date. Mm-hmm. And so that's where really you're applying business logic to the data in your warehouse. And then you start having different tiers of data. So you'll have like bronze, gold, like bronze, silver, gold, and bronze will be like your raw data. Silver will be like, your staging where you have these sort of these intermediate models. And then gold will be like, something that a business user can grab and say, okay, I actually understand what this means, right? Now I can take this and I can slice and dice it and I can explore it. And so I think that's really, sort of the status quo right now in the state of the art is teams collecting data through a series of tools. They're sending that data to a warehouse, and usually they're sending most of it. Now there is a lag to get some of that data in when you add a new app, and that's, can be frustrating, but it needs to be done. And these tools like Fivetran and Stitch make it pretty easy to do that quickly. And then the last step is, structuring and transforming that data into different tiers. And then you can have also these concepts of like data lakes and data marts, where you're basically partitioning that data so that, you're segmenting your warehouse and dividing it so it's more organized and available to different, business units.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, data warehouses and business intelligence and analytics. What's the difference between business intelligence and analytics? Because if you have the data, you got the analytics, but how do you get to business intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good question, and for me, a lot of this is like semantics, right? I would put like business intelligence and reporting in sort of the same category, which is you have dashboards, you have these somewhat static things that you're going to check metrics, right? Those are the things up on monitors in your hallways at a startup. Those are the things that you have bookmarks. And then I think analytics is really about, okay, what are the ad hoc questions that you have? What are the hypothetical questions that you have on a daily basis? What are those things that you're really trying to double click into the data to ask a different question of what's on the standard static dashboard? And for us, I think that's really the key problem that we think that we solve in the market that's not really being solved today, which is you've had these business intelligence and reporting tools, for the last couple of decades, right? You've had your Tableaus and Lookers of the world. And in large part, they're still predicated on this request response workflow, right? You have business users that can come in, they can do a little bit of, slicing and dicing, they can do some filtering, but they're still largely working out of sheets because that's where they need to be able to actually grok that data and make it usable and turn it into lists and turn it into workflows and turn it into things that help them drive their business forward. And so for us, the problem that we saw, firsthand is you have these amazing tools, but they're mostly built by data teams for data teams under this sort of guise of business intelligence, right? And for us, it was really frustrating because you would see how the operators would actually work versus the reality of, hey, here's our beautiful dashboards and here's all the data, but the operators it was really hard to find the data. It's really hard to collaborate and say, hey, I need something else. It's really hard to double click into the data. And so that's why you see most teams taking this out into sheets. And so for us, the problem that we wanted to solve is, okay, how can we actually bring this data, not in forms of the metrics, right? That's mostly a solved problem, these dashboards, but how do we get this data and put it in the operator's hands so that they can do what they want to do with the skills that they have, which is, largely spreadsheets, right? Excel is the first programming language that most people learn. And it's for a lot of people, it's the only programming language that they learn. And it's a beautiful way to flexibly interact with data and sort of malleate it into the shape and the use case that you want. And so that's really where we...
Yeah, talking about that Excel thing, I know there's so many projects that I've worked on before, and people ask, well, can I just get it in Excel? Can you just export that to Excel? And that's a lot of the work that you do with your data is just put it into Excel to give it to someone to do.
the research on it. But if it's reading the live data already in their Excel, it kind of takes that element out of it, which makes it a lot easier and a lot closer to where, the end user wants to be. I can go back to the days of building the first data warehouse when we were using a SQL report writer to kind of build some reports and dashboards, and people would say, well, just export it in Excel and give it to me there. I don't want to go through this whole process. It's like we put all this time and effort into building these SRS packages and all this stuff, and it's not, and everybody just wants Excel.
And that's like generally referred to as like the last mile of analytics, right? Which is you see these data teams that are spending millions of dollars on a data stack, and they have all these advanced pipelines, and then the actual way that the majority of their stakeholders interact with that multi-million-dollar stack is just through Excel or Google Sheets. Yeah. And so for us, it's like this crazy cognitive dissonance. It just seems totally broken that you don't have visibility into how your stakeholders are using the data that you're spending so much time and effort on collecting, structuring, and getting into a good shape. You actually don't have any insight into these sheets. You don't have insights into their reporting workflows when they're all in Google Sheets or Excel. And so for us, if we can bring that into a governed environment, if we can bring that into a visible environment for the data teams, you can actually say, hey, actually, and seeing which models that you're using, I'm seeing how you're using this data, and you can start that conversation, right? And make those, the work that the data team is doing more valuable, right? And also make them feel better about their work. No one wants to, go and get a hard technical skill, a statistics degree, and then have to work on, repetitive SQL queries all day that just end up in a CSV and they never see the light of day, right? Mm-hmm. They want to actually elevate their work and be more strategic. And so if we can give them a way to say, hey, you're working on valuable things because you have feedback on what's valuable and what's not, and, you're also getting time back to work on those strategic levers for the business, then both sides are happy, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, you founded this company kind of like right in the middle of COVID lockdown. What was that like? There had to be like a lot of fear going into something like that.
Yes. Fear is one of the emotions. There's a lot of emotions. No, we had a good group of guys that we had all worked together for a long time, and we were friends at Flexport. And, I think we're getting to that age where it's like, okay, this is going to be we have a couple of years left of a window to, where we don't have much, not a lot of dependencies in our personal life. And so let's go and try to do this. And, it started with working on my buddy's couch, my co-founder's couch for a few months, and we're whiteboarding, and, we had a loose idea of the problem that we wanted to solve, and, started hitting the road and talking to VCs. And luckily, we're in San Francisco, and we had a lot of connections to that world. And so we had a lot of people help us, and, refining the deck and, having these conversations. And, it took a few months of just iterating on it and getting it to a state that we wanted, and ended up raising our seed round from Sequoia Capital and a handful of other folks, SV Angel, Abstract Ventures, a few angels from there. And yeah, really hit the ground running, but it was totally new for me, right? And pretty exciting all at the same time. But I think really what we tried to do, and I think we were really lucky in this regard, was going out to all of our friends, all of our coworkers, anyone working in technology or somewhat near data. And because people, I think, were frankly pretty bored with COVID, and they're, cooped up in their house, they were willing to talk to us. And so we just did hundreds of calls, research, and getting feedback on our early prototypes, and really refining the problem that we wanted to solve. And so that was hugely helpful for us in being able to tell the story that we wanted to tell to investors, and also helping shape the early product and really refining what we wanted to go after. So yeah, all in all, it was pretty crazy time to do it, but I didn't want to it's the regret minimization framework. Right? Yeah. I didn't want to spend a couple more years and have this thing that I knew I always wanted to do, which is start a business, and look back and say I wasted an opportunity. So yeah, it was a pretty crazy time.
Awesome. And it sounds like Canvas is a tool that you guys can use in yourself, not just, to sell the product, but also to kind of help your business grow and learn about your customers and what makes the most sense when it comes to the data that you're also acquiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, selfishly, I'm building the tool that I always wanted, which was, give me the ability to quickly get data in one place, give me the ability to quickly get it into a spreadsheet like format, but also give me the ability to write some SQL. And so that's selfishly, I think what I wanted most, and I'm really excited that we're drinking our own champagne or eating your own dog food, whatever you call it. And
it depends if it's a good product or a bad product, right?
Yes, exactly. So if it doesn't work, you don't have to hear that from a prospect or a customer. So that part has been really handy for us, and being able to be data driven from the get-go, right? And so we run our investor meetings from our tool, right? We share our charts from our tool, and that's a pretty exciting thing, because when you're in the early days, and we only launched in February of this year, it's still very early for us. Knowing the product inside and out and really building it around yourself and your own pain points is honestly a cheat code, and that's something that we took a lot from our days at Flexport as well, which is we had logistics, all of our logistics operations teams came from the consumer side, right? They came from our client side. And so they would know, hey, this is a bad experience. And they, the engineers and myself would sit next to them as we're watching their workflows, and they're crazy. And we could very quickly iterate and say, okay, we're building this tool for ourselves, and this is what we need. This is what we know that we need to do.
Cool. So what's kind of been your like most challenging part of launching something like this and getting this tool out there for the world to see?
Yeah, I think the most challenging part is really working on differentiation. I think for us, we're in a very crowded, very competitive space. There's a sort of Cambrian explosion of data tools happening right now. There's this landscape of data tools graphic that went semi-viral, and the same guy does it every year, and every year it gets more and more anxiety inducing. And so for us, the challenge is, how do you cut through that noise? How do you be different? And so we've taken a couple turns and a couple of attempts at doing that. And I think, this matters for every business, but especially businesses, if you're in a red ocean environment where there's a ton of competition, you really have to figure out what is the problem that you're solving, but how can you solve it in a different way? And it's not being different just for the sake of being different. It's being different on the key points that customers will really resonate with. So for us, we saw that most of the tools in the market require a sort of sales heavy implementation, right? They don't have very transparent pricing. They take a long time to get started. It feels like this big implementation thing that you're going to have to go through with multiple or multiple departments in your work collaborating and scoping it out. And so for us, that was a key thing. We wanted to be product-led growth, right? So you can sign up on our site, you can start using the tool for 2 weeks for free, connect your data without even talking to us, right? Which is kind of shocking that people actually do that, but they do. And we're SOC 2 compliant and try to make it clear that we know what we're doing. But that was one of the things that we really wanted to differentiate on. Another one was being collaborative, right? We saw how painful it was for teams to share SQL snippets and Slacks and screenshots of charts and spreadsheets with crazy formulas. And so that was another piece that we really wanted to be different and cut through that noise there and really show the value of especially in a remote environment, right? That was an asymmetrical advantage for us because a lot of the tools were built for the 2000s when everyone was in the office, or 2010s when everyone was in the office. And so we had to approach it from first principles with being collaborative. And I think the last piece is really narrowing in on who exactly your tool is for. You know, you have a horizontal tool like ours, you have to pick, right? You have to say, hey, we get you, right? As a biz ops team, as a chief of staff, as a finance team, we understand, your pains. And so I think that's the last part is really speaking to someone specific, or else, you'll end up speaking to no one. And so I think those are the big two things: is learning how to differentiate the product, and not just for the sake of differentiation, but actually being different in the parts that really matter, and really repeating those time and time again. And I think the other one is really speaking to a specific audience.
Awesome. So what has been kind of the your model or method for building a team?
Yeah, model for building the team is, we're actually trying to keep it pretty lean at the moment, and trying to really, given the current environment that we're all in, really, make sure that the fundamentals and the principles of, the fundamentals of the business are right, that this is the thing that is going to work, and scale before you try to, go out and hire a bunch of people. And so for us, I think that was key, especially when you're seeing a lot of these startups that had scaled really quickly and are having to, do some pretty difficult decisions. And I think really what you're looking for and what you're optimizing for at the early stage is you can't settle. You can't go out there and say like, okay, you're in a room and after the interview you have, 2 out of 3 people are like, yeah, they're great. And you have one person who's just so on them. And I talked to a lot of founders and I asked them, what their biggest, sort of regrets were. And, it's most frequently we didn't build it the right way first. Right. And I think that comes from moving too fast. And if you know exactly the problem that you're trying to solve and how people use your tool, then you have a better chance of building it for the right way from first principles to start with. So you don't have to go and refactor and rebuild your application, 3 years down the line. And that can get really dicey. And then the other one is make sure that you don't settle on employees, and you have to really find generalists early on that are willing to go to battle every day. And especially this stage is really hard, right? There's a million things that are broken and you have to pick a handful on a daily basis to go out and fix. And so you're looking for generalists that are, optimistic, they're passionate, they hustle, and they're also good people that are capable of, sloping and not, being caught in an intercept and not growing with the team.
Yeah. It sounds like you've got the right kind of people that you're looking for. You're getting the people that are passionate about it, that are generalists, because you get that, you need people that can put on different hats depending on, what the next fire that's coming up is, or what the next request is, or the next idea that kind of like, oh, wow, this is something we should definitely put in our product because it would make, this piece so much better or so much easier, and be able to shift gears and integrate pieces and parts all over the place. So I think that's pretty awesome. And I like what you said about finding someone that's passionate, that really, you said you're drinking your own champagne. So you want someone that's also like excited about that as well, so that they can be involved in the startup kind of culture. So that's pretty cool. So how can people connect with you online and learn more about Canvas and the things that you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can head to our site. It's canvasapp.com. Mm-hmm. Or you can get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. My Twitter handle is Ryan J Buick, Buick. And like I mentioned, you can try out our tool, connect your data sources, and I'll work with you if you need any help, and we can help you get to your first sort of aha moment there. And other than that, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, and canvasapp.com.
All right. And I'll link all that up in the show notes too at geekleader.com. And Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing a little bit of insights on data and analytics and business intelligence and all that good stuff. So thanks so much.
Yeah, that was a ton of fun. Thanks for having me, John.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.